I'm Roger Altman and welcome to my shop. What I'm going to be doing in this video is taking this here cart, which I went into a little bit more of a description here in a little bit of a miniature shop tour that follows, and modify it to mount my drill press on. I got a benchtop drill press that needs to be relocated, as you'll see in a minute. And what I'm going to do with this cart is modify the top of it and add some, it's upside down right now because I need to do some work on it. This area down here below will have a drawer, and then it'll be a cabinet space for some storage underneath. What I had to do was, I had got 3 of these, and this one here, the wheels wouldn't turn. None of the casters, they were rusted up real bad. Needed to get them freed up, and so what do you use to fix rusted up casters? Castor oil. No, not really. A little bit of liquid wrench and some knocker loose and some other type of oil. This had rusted up real bad. There was a tremendous amount of rust on this cart. I still haven't got it all off of the back of it. I don't know what was stored on this. It was picked up at a sale. It had been kept outdoors. The top of it was just full of garbage, and because the top does hold water, and there was some metal laying in it, and it was quite the mess. But took a sander to it and a little bit of navel jelly, and going to do some major modifications to this. I'll be cutting part of this tray off to add a elevated section, so this will actually be taller, and that'll also give me room to have a drawer in where I can keep some accessories for my drill press, like bits, hole saws, and so on. And in the lower section, turn back upright, this down here I'll be putting one more drawer in right here at this level, and then we'll have a 2-door cabinet with some storage here underneath. So that's the whole idea of this build. This cart's made by Rubbermaid. New, they're about $100 or so, maybe a little more. Harbor Freight also sells these under their brand, but if you turn one upside down and look at it, you'll still see it's made by Rubbermaid. It's basically the same cart. But we'll go on with a little bit of shop tour, and then after that we'll get into the build. Yes, one other thing I need to interject here is, yeah, I'm wearing an apron here, working on that cart. A lot of rust flying around and so on from the wire brush and the sander, and working with some solvents on it, and my wife had really gotten tired of me getting stuff across the belly of my shirts. So suggested I wear an apron, so not something I normally wear when I'm using like overhead on perhaps on the table saw or something. I don't like anything loose around me, so I probably wouldn't be wearing it there, but yeah, you see me in an apron. Rare occurrence, and I really don't understand how these women can tie that behind their back so easy. Took me quite a few tries to get it, but maybe it's just a guy thing. Okay, we'll get on with a little shop tour. Okay, so here's a dilemma. I've got my drill press on a cart right here, and it works just fine. It's actually the right height for me since I'm tall, but the problem is it is over the top of our paper shredder, and we use a tremendous amount of shredded paper with our e-commerce business for packing, and we're getting into the season where this is used quite a bit. A little sawdust in the paper doesn't hurt a thing. The problem is the wood chips. For example, when I'm using a Forstner bit like what's in there right now, those large chips fall down and they get into the top of the shredder right there and will create a jam, and that's not going to fly. As you know, I've got a small shop here. I don't have a whole lot of area to work with. I'm kind of limited to one bay of this 3-car garage building. The other 2/3 of it are used for our e-commerce business. So what my plan is to put this drill press right here onto one of these type of carts, like I have my DeWalt planer mounted on, and I'll do another video on that here sometime in the future. and it'll be on wheels. I picked up a couple of these carts at a estate sale or auction type thing, farm auction, whatever. I don't quite remember what sale I was at, but I bought 3 of these. 2 of them are in pretty good shape. One of them had a real problem with the wheels on it, and we'll get into the fix of that and how I'm going to modify it here in just a minute. But I wanted to show you a little bit of an overview of why this isn't going to work, where it's at. It like one of those seemed like a good idea at the time. I have to pretty much keep everything on wheels. This cart right here you see with my sander and bandsaw sitting on it, that is mobile. I could pick those up and move them if I want to. This cart below it I built out of a old overhead projector cart, and if you don't know what an overhead projector is, ask your daddy or grandparents, they'll tell you what that is. And it's on wheels, and I'm able to move it. I've got a plug-in strip on the back of it. I'm able to move it and roll it around and take it to wherever I need it. So I'm going to do kind of the same kind of thing with my drill press here, and hopefully that'll make a big difference. I had thought about a flip cart, but a flip cart on a drill press isn't really very convenient. I do use the drill press quite a bit. I'll save the flip cart idea for my possibly my spindle sander when I get it, or my shaper, which is out in the back shed. I don't have room for it in here. But, I'm going to be trying to work something out a little different. I got this tight fit back in here where I have to get everything into a small place. So a little bit of a walk around here you can see of the shop. So I'm very limited in space and what I can do, and my table saw and my miter saw take out most of the area. So we'll get on with my build. Okay, I've taken the top off of it, and what I intend to do is cut right along here. I'm going to retain this back here for a place to set my drink of choice. Won't get into what that, well, in the morning it'll be coffee, and later in the day it may be a little bit of that there barley pop or barley soda, depending on what part of the country you're from. But anyway, what I'm going to do here is cut this down on both sides in the ends here, and cut all this tray part off and just leave the base plate. I'm going to be building a box that will basically sit on here. It'll be about this high or so, to elevate it a little bit. The drill press will actually bolt to the top of that. They'll have a place to the side for some accessories. Underneath that will be a drawer. So what I need to do first here is cut this off. And something else I noticed, my table saw is very flat. It's perfectly flat. This is not. As you can see here, it's got some wobblation to it. And I also noticed that the sides are bowed in quite a bit from probably from sitting out in the weather and the sun and everything. So what I'm going to do first here is get the sides cut off, and then we'll start building the box for it. Okay, didn't shoot the video of cutting those sides off, but I probably should have. It would have been entertaining. You can see what a piece of plastic coming out of the table saw at 3,500 RPM looks like. Had a little piece, I set the fence up, cut these sides off, and when I did the last side, it decided to get caught between the fence and the table, and it shot back pretty good. Kind of exciting. Anyway, what I need to do here now is do a little sanding, get these edges all smoothed out, and you can see this. This is what it looks like right now, and this will be the part I'll be building the box on, but I want to make sure this is all good and flat. I got just a little bit of a lip here on this side, probably about a 64th and about a 16th over here, so I want to get this all flat. Of course, you don't want to stand there and watch me sand, so that's going to be my next step. Okay, this build's going to take place over several days. Normally I would like to do a project from start to finish all at once, but we got too many things going on here with our nursery and greenhouses, and our business is starting to pick up for spring shipment to the south and west coast. So This is going to be done over several days. But anyway, the first part of this is I cut the sides off of this top, and I've got that machine down and flat. Then I took a measurement, and the top of that where this is going to set is 30.5 by 16 7/8. Since I'm putting 3/4 inch plywood around the outside of it all the way around, that reduces the dimensions of the bottom piece. In case you're keeping track and are going to make one of these, your bottom piece would be 29 by 15 3/8. After looking at this and building the box, I decided that it'd be better to have a center support in here. So instead of having one drawer, I'll have two. I've got the face frame made and put on. I figure with the weight of the drill press and everything that'll be on there, that and the other side will be a flat surface. And of course, you know, any type of flat surface gathers all kinds of stuff. And I'm really guilty of that because every flat surface in here has got something sitting on it. At any rate, this is put together with pocket holes and pocket screws. I use the Craig jig here. Already had it, so that's what I use. At any rate, this is all put together and screwed and glued. What I need to do next is mount this to the plastic platform, and I'm going to bolt it on. And if you look at the bottom of this platform, it's got a diamond shape to it for strength, I suppose. So what I need to do is flip this around here, get this set on here. I'll probably put a couple clamps on it, and then I will be able to drill my holes for where I'm going to put bolts. I'm just going to use 1/4 20-inch bolts and some fender washers on the bottom, and get this all mounted. So you certainly don't need to sit and watch me drill a bunch of holes. So I'll get all this part of it done, and we'll come back with the next part. Don't know if it'll be today or tomorrow or the next day or maybe next week. We'll see how it goes. Okay, got the drawer section mounted to the top here. Flip this up to see just some bolts through it. Flip it around on the back. Fender washers, nuts. Pretty simple. And the reason I don't have a top on there is a couple of reasons. Number one is to put the drawer slides in, it's a lot easier if their top isn't on here because I can just reach right in and do it. And the second reason is I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do for a top there. If I'm just going to do a piece of plywood, or if I'm going to do something weird and exotic, or who knows what. But at any rate, that's that part of it. And on the next part of this build, this is the rest of it. You notice the wheels are now missing. I was rolling this base piece around, and I happened to notice there was a bunch of little steel BBs all over the floor that I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Well, I eventually did figure it out. The wheels that were on here that I mentioned at the beginning of this video were rusted real bad, that I got all freed up. Well, once I got them freed up and working good, they all fell out. So I got some new casters ordered, some heavier duty ones, and the ones I ordered will also have brakes on them, so I don't have to chase the cart around when I'm trying to drill something. Anyway, the next part of this is I'm going to enclose three sides of this with a 1/4 inch tempered hardboard that I got from it's actually used as a temporary floor and some switch gear on a electrical project I was on last year, or year before last. I think this has been sitting around the shop here for quite a while. This will make a good use for it. It'll just be basically the paneling on the ends and on the sides. And then on the front, I'll be making a face frame and some cabinet doors, and I may put a shelf in here. I think this is just too much space to have just for one open thing. Or I may decide to put a drawer in, still undecided. I'll get the three sides in and do a little thinking about it, but putting the sides in is going to be pretty simple. I'll just cut some pieces to fit in here. There's enough of a flange in here I can stick some bolts through here with some nuts on the back and bolt the frame in there. So I'm going to do that before I put the top back on it. It'll make it a lot easier to work on. So I'll get some pieces cut and we'll come back and work on that. Okay, a little discovery as I was building this and starting to put the back on here and the sides is the everything is not perfectly flush like you would think it would be. There's a little bit of an offset between the bottom here where I have this bolted on and the side rails of about 1/4 of an inch. So, you know, another piece of 1/4 inch material in there, whoops, would bring that out to where it needs to be. So I think what I'm going to do is cut some strips and run it through the router table, put a round over on it, and we'll have a little bit of decorative trim on 3 sides. Just thought I'd point this out in case you decided to build one of these out of one of these carts. It's something you're going to run into. So I'll get some strips cut and do some round over and a little bit of decorative stuff, and we'll move on to the next part. I'm also going to work on the shelf. I had decided to put a shelf in here. Flip this around. I'm going to put a shelf at about this level. These little braces or whatever you call it, these little gussets in here all line up so they'll make a good support. I'll just cut a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and round the edges over and get that set in, and I'll do that before I get too much farther on this, or otherwise I'll never get it in there. But that's going to be one more addition. So be back after I do a few more modifications here. Okay, back to the top section here. I've added some little spacers in, as you can probably see down here on each side, to allow the drawer slides to come out flush with the face frame, like so. I've got the drawer slides mounted on one side. The opening here is 16 inches deep, and I could use, actually it's a little over 16, I could use 16-inch drawer slides, but I didn't have any. But I've got a whole bunch of 14-inch ones left over from another project. One thing that's nice about these is they have a stop in the bottom, which once the drawer slides in, it kind of locks. So when I'm rolling this thing around, I don't have to worry about the drawers sliding out. What I've done here is cut a spacer, a little bit warped, but it's just a spacer, and I use this to space up the level so that they'll all be the same all the way across. I'll get this out here. And this particular bit in here is a self-centering bit for a potted holder, real nice to have. And of course, if I put this in a regular drill, I don't have room for it inside. Just like that, and I'll put 3 screws on each side. I'm using number 6 flatheads, and incidentally a nice little way to kind of keep some of your hardware organized. This is actually a pill dispenser. They sell these on Amazon and they're not very expensive. And what I've done is the top just pops off, so your little tiny screws you have, like you know, number 6 by half and 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/4. Number 4 by half, 4 by 3/4. I've got 3 of these set up for all these little screws that are always kind of hard to keep organized. So this is a little shop storage tip on how to do that. Okay, this again is one of the reasons I left the top off, because trying to put these drawer slides in with the top on here would be a real pain in the rear. So I'll get the rest of these drawer slides on and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, got the drawer slides all mounted, and I pulled them out here to show you how you set up for drawers when you're using these drawer slides. Each slide takes up 1/2 inch. For example, the opening here is 12 7/8. The distance between the slides is 11 7/8. So that's something to keep in mind when you're building your drawers. I always build my face frame and my cabinet and install the drawer slides, and then I build the drawers. I don't build the drawers first and then try to make the cabinet to fit it. That's kind of a pain in the rear way to do it. I also made both of these so they're identical, so just for the heck of it, I thought it'd be kind of nice to have things identical. So this side is 12 7/8, so is this side, so therefore my drawer will need to be 11 7/8 wide. I'll be having another face that will go on the front of it, which we'll get into when we get to that point. What I'm going to do next is make what I call drawer stock. These are not going to be heavy-duty drawers with 100 pounds in them or anything. I'll probably use them for some drill bits and hole saws and some miscellaneous things I'll use around the drill press. There'll be nothing heavy in there. So instead of using 3/4 stock for the sides and the back and the front, I'll be using half-inch birch plywood. I've got some scraps of it, which will be just fine for this application. The front will be 3/4, and I've got some leftover oak MDO I may use for the drawer fronts. I'll see when I get to that point. At any rate, I'll get set up here and I'll make some drawer stock. I'll show you how I do that. And what I'm working on here is what I call drawer stock, and here's a piece left over from another project. It's just a scrap. You see I cut a 1/4 inch dadu in this. This is 1/2 inch thick birch plywood. I cut a 1/4 inch dadu in this, 1/4 inch deep, 3/8 up from the bottom. That'll hold the bottom piece. And then at the top, I round over using on the router table. I use a round over bit. So at the top of this is rounded and there's no sharp edges or anything. I've already cut this down to width. What I need to do next, put my dadu stack in, cut these dadus. I make long pieces like this here, and what I just call it drawer stock. And then from there I cut it down, and whether or not I do half rabbits on the corners or half blind dovetails, I haven't quite decided yet. I have to see how much time allows. But moving on, I'll get the dadu stack in and get some dadus cut, and we'll get some drawers made. They were set up, 1/4 inch wide dadu blade, stack in there, 1/4 inch high, 3/8 of an inch from the fence. There we have it. And my next step will be to set up the router table with a round over bit on it. And one other thing that's important when you are cutting these, I don't know if you could tell, there's a little bit of a bow to this piece of plywood. You have to keep constant downward pressure down, or you'll end up with your dadu groove will not be consistent. When you go to put your bottom panel in, it won't fit. So we get the dadu or the router table set up here and do some roundovers. Thought I would show the setup a little bit here on the roundover. The fence is not necessary I'm using it because I've got dust collection hooked up to it, and it'll suck up all the chips and I won't have quite so much clean up later. The way this is set up, because the run over bit does have a bearing on it, is that bearing and the edge of the fence are equal. So as I drag my straight edge along here, whether you can see that or not, it's flush with the fence and the bearing just barely turns with it. So that's how this is set up. Okay, get on with doing a little bit of roundover work here. Okay, and then after I get my drawers cut and fit and put together, a piece of 220 sandpaper around that rounded over edge will make that nice and smooth. I'll probably put some type of polyurethane or shellac or something on it to protect it, but it makes for a lot finer finish, and it's a lot better than having that square corner at the top, which could chip easier. You could possibly get a splinter off of it. So the next thing I'll need to do is decide how I'm going to put these drawers together. Okay, what I didn't get was me cutting these half rabbets. I forgot to push the record button on the camera, so brain dead moment. What we've got, these are the full width of 11 7/8 for these drawer openings, and what I've done is cut what they call a half rabbet. So I've got a 1/4 inch in both directions, 1/4 inch deep and a 1/4 inch, however you want to call that, and you can see the end view of it there. Then on the sides I made them a 1/2 inch shorter because you'll be adding a 1/4 inch on each end from the width of this, and this fits in like so. There we go. Now all I need to do is cut the drawer bottom pieces and glue these together. What I do is, besides gluing them, I'll shoot a couple brads in the corners to hold it. Then I'll double check it with a square to make sure that they are square before the glue sets up. That comes from the School of Hard Knocks because I've made that mistake before. Then you end up with a drawer that isn't square and then it doesn't work at all. So I'll get these made, and then I'll probably be moving on to making some drawer fronts. Well, drawers are put together, so I guess it's time to watch some glue dry. And I've got just a thing to have with it. So we'll get this, let this dry and set up overnight, and tomorrow I'll be making some drawer fronts. Okay, got the drawers out of the clamps and the edges sanded and the excess glue cleaned off and all that. I've already got one of them mounted here. You can see there. And it's got that positive lock. And I still have to make the drawer fronts. We'll get to that here shortly. I'll show you how I do this in case you've never done drawer slides before. I did cheat these back a little bit because they are only 14 inch instead of 16 inch, and I got 16 inch drawers, but I had the slides and didn't want to make a trip to go buy anymore. So I'll show you how I do the alignment here. I lay a piece of wood down in the bottom, just so you can see. Then I have a piece of cardboard on top for a spacer. Set that at the back. That sets on this lip down here. Leave the drawer out part way. And I slip a little piece of cardboard underneath each corner. This would have helped if I would have pushed the drawer slides out first. Yeah, I did make a little mark on the side here where the flange needs to come to. There's, yeah, zoom in on this here. Hopefully you can see this here. There's a vertical slot and there's a hole and there's a horizontal slot. I always use the horizontal slot in case I need to make any adjustment back and forth. And with this being 1/2 inch stock, I'm using number 6 by 1/2 screws. And after you get the first one in, you just pull the drawer out farther till you get to the next set of holes. Except I'm caught on something here. The cardboard got caught. Important to have that little piece of cardboard underneath there as a spacer, otherwise your drawer will drag. And the final hole is back here in this little opening. we are. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is make some gussets, little triangle gussets to mount on the corners here, probably a couple in the middle. I have some pre-drilled holes in the bottom of them to mount my top. That way when I do get my top made, I'll set it on there. I can just take the drawers out and go in with my angle driver and shoot some screws up, hold the top down. There won't be any screws exposed on the top. And then I need to make some drawer fronts. So we'll need to get set up for that. Okay, I got my drawer fronts cut, half-inch overlap each direction. This is 3/4 inch oak veneered MDO. I had a scrap left over from another project, and since this is going to be painted, when I do the routing on it, if I did with plywood, it would not look real good. MDO has a medium density fiberboard core, kind of like MDF. But it has a veneer on the outside, and all their scraps, and it just happened to be a piece laying around here that was perfect for both of these drawer fronts. It makes a nice finished edge. So this is a test piece, so I could get my bit all lined up. It makes a profile like this. A little bit of a round over on the front. This side here was cut too deep as I was trying to get my depth set. But this, it makes a nice rounded edge. The panel then fits on the drawer like this, and you can use your fingers underneath to pull it out, or on the sides, either one, and you don't have to have a drawer pull. Because I have a habit of getting snagged on drawer pulls. So I figure this way I won't need one. And after I get done here, I'll show you the profile of the router bit. Here's a close-up of the router bit right here, and this is how it looks after it's been run through. And of course I'll need to do a little sanding on this to get all the edges super smooth, but as I mentioned before, you can just stick your fingers under here to pull the drawer out, and you don't actually have to have a drawer pull on this. Yeah, it's a Yonico bit. A lot of people poo-poo those, but I have had no problems with the Yonico bits. It's not something I use in production. I suppose if I was going to be in production I'd get a Freud or something, but this works just fine for what it is. Okay, I'll get set up here. Okay, for mounting the drawer fronts, this is real handy when everything's wide open like this. You can just line your drawer front on there and throw a clamp on it and shoot some screws in from the back. What I've done is, and I did this off camera, I have 4 holes drilled in each drawer front on the base drawer that are 1/4 inch, and then I'll use some screws to screw through from the back, and with that being a 1/4 inch hole, it allows me a little bit of adjustment in case I'm off a little bit. But I've got this one here is on with 2 screws, and this one here I'm about to do, and I got a level on there, and it's just about perfect. So we'll get a screw in this. Then if I need to make any kind of small adjustments, smaller adjustments from there, I can always back the screws off a little bit and jiggle them around because the holes are oversized. And there we have a drawer. And with that positive stop, they'll stay shut and it won't be flopping open. I will need to put my other 4 screws in, and then I'll be ready to go on to putting my gussets on the corners. The next step on my drill press cart here was to build a face frame for it. And the way this is attached is just 3/4 inch plywood, and I drilled and countersunk 1024 machine screws in there, and they're nutted on the back with washers. And then I went back and filled these holes out. Since this is going to be painted, you'll never see it. Got my new wheels on here now. I put the locking ones on the face side where the cabinet will be. I can easily flip that down and lock it. Okay, my next step here will be to be doing a little bit more finish sanding. I did go over these edges with a round over bit on a little handheld router. Round some of those over so there wouldn't be any splinters. One thing I had was a little area right here where, since this plastic curves and the wood was straight, this is just a little piece of cold molding scrap that I glued in there. I've got all my sides in here. My next thing to do will be give this a good wipe down with some acetone and shoot some primer on this plastic so that my finish coat will stick to it. If I try to use the regular latex like I would use on the wood, it'd peel right off that plastic. So I've got some Zinsser primer I'm going to be putting on this after I wipe it down with acetone and do a little bit more sanding. So after that, I'll probably get it flipped over and decide what I want to do for a top. Well, I need to make the doors too, and we'll get to that. That's a pretty simple and straightforward thing. Okay, moving on to the doors, I had a couple different ways I could do this. One would be rail and style with a panel inserted. This is a scrap piece from when I built some other cabinets. It has a profile on it, and then you would use a piece of 1/4 inch hardboard or plywood, and it would set in there like that, and this would be framed. And then I was going to do a 3/8 overlay with a 3/8 inset. Then I happened to notice that I had some scraps of this MDO like I used for the drawer fronts, and they were almost the right size. Obviously they're a little bit oversized, I wouldn't be able to use them at all. I measured my door openings, they're 11 inches by 18 inches. I need to allow 3/8 of an inch on each side, so I need to add 3/4 to the width and 3/4 to the height. Then I'll need to cut a 3/8 rabbet all the way around, and then on the front I'll use a 3/8 roundover bit around the 4 sides, make a roundover, and I have some cabinet hinges left over from who knows where. They don't necessarily match anything, but this is shop furniture, so that doesn't make any difference. But I will get set up. I'll show you how we cut these doors. Okay, to get this 3/8 of an inch cut out here, a rabbet, the blade is set 3/8 of an inch high, and from the fence to that side of the blade is 3/8 of an inch. That way I could cut around all 4 sides flat, and then I'll turn it up and we'll get the cutout done on it. The next cut is made with the board facing up like this. Do it the right way around here. Now, if you don't have a tall fence, you either need to make an auxiliary fence or put a dado blade in or use a router table or whatever. Don't try to do this against a regular fence or you will have a disaster. It's way too easy to get tippy like this and you could have an accident. Okay, you'll end up with a profile like this. The next thing I'll do, I'll cut the other door here in a minute. Then I will set up the router table and I'll put a 3/8 round over on this so the front panel will have a rounded over curve on it, no sharp edges. This can also be done on a shaper, and I do have one, but it's out in the back shed and I hate to drag it up here and get it all set up just to cut 2 doors. But I'm going to get the rest of these cut and then we'll get the router table set up. So 3/8 round over bit set up in here, and I did a little test piece here to make sure I had my profiles like I wanted. Some scrap plywood, but it made the perfect profile. So this, get it down here where you can see it. This is what the profile looks like on the end. This is a finished piece. I guess I should have mentioned if you're not experienced with routering and using a router or a router table, when you're going across end grain, always do that first because it can leave a little bit of tear out on the corners. Then when you go by and go the other direction, it will cover up that tear out and it won't show on your finished piece. Okay, got the doors made, so need to do a little sanding here and some painting and decide what I'm going to do for the top, which the top will probably be the next project. Okay, for the top of this cart, I could do double 3/4 MDF. That's what I did when I built my table saw router table setup. Or I could do just a sheet of plywood, or, and I'm going to get a little bit fancy here, I've got some Douglas fir cutoffs out in the back shed, and I think what I'm going to do is rip those down into strips, then glue the strips together. I need a top that's roughly 19 by 32. I believe I've got a bunch of Douglas fir cutoffs out there. I'm going to go out and gather up and thaw them out a little bit and rip them down, and then do a glue up for a top. I might even get a little spiffy and go around the edges with something exotic. We'll have to see how it goes, but that's my plan. Okay, went out through my scrap pile out there and come up with a bunch of cutoffs of Douglas fir. I've got them ripped down into roughly 1.5 inch squares, and I've kind of laid out how I'm going to do the glue up. So what I'm going to do is glue all these together, but I'll do it in 2 sections. That way I can run each section through my planer, and then after I get those 2 planed, I only have 1 more joint to make, and I'll join that last one up. So get this glued up and into the clamps and let her set overnight. Okay, got these 2 sections planed out of the clamps and planed down like I want them here, kind of a rough plane, nice and smooth. I'll be gluing these 2 sections together and get those clamped and let them set overnight. And then I'll proceed on to doing the trimming and some of the shaping for the top. Using Titebond 1 here. Won't be any place where this is going to be exposed to the weather or anything, and I like the finger method of getting the glue spread here. I've got a brush, but this works just as well. More of a hands-on experience. One thing you absolutely want to make sure you do is get a very good glue coverage so you don't get any dry places in there. So a lot of squeeze out is a good thing. Do an initial light clamping here. It's real important when you're doing a glue up like this, when you can't run it through a planer again, to get things as close as you can to perfect. A little bit of a hump here in the center, but I can take that out with a belt sander later. And yes, these are Harbor Freight clamps. They actually work pretty well. Here's a couple. Here's one I haven't modified yet, but if you cut a piece of 1 by hardwood and knock this cap out and place it down on the inside. These will not flex. They actually work quite well. I'll clean up as much of the squeeze out as I can right now. Could go back afterwards and use a scraper. There's no such thing as too many clamps. If you're on a budget starting out, these pipe clamps are quite useful, and they're fairly inexpensive. I've got a bunch here I got at a estate auction. They're really old Jorgensen type, but they work perfect. What's even better, when you're at one of them auctions and nobody else knows what they are, you can really get a deal. Okay, we'll let that set up overnight, and then I can do some trimming and get my edges squared up, and I'll probably put a chamfer around the sides and come up with some type of finish, and then we'll be ready to mount it on the stand. Okay, moving on to the top here, I've got the top glued together now to the clamps. I've given it kind of a little rough sanding with some 80 grit. I got a couple little knot holes here. I'm going to put a little bit of filler in. Once I get the filler in there, I'll give that another rough sanding, and I intend to put either a chamfer or round over around all the edges, and then I'll get it mounted to the cabinet. Okay, I got my top all sanded down, at least rough sanded. What I'm going to do next is put a chamfer around the outside edges, which will leave a profile like this. This here was a test piece. Puts a little angle on the side here and makes it a little bit more finished. Of course, what you want to do when you're routing around something like that is you want to do the end grain first, in case there's tear out on the corners. That way, when you come back and do along with the grain, any little bit of tear out you got will, the routing will take that out. Okay, and there we have it. Do a little bit of finish sanding here, and decide I'm going to put a stain on here and some coats of spar urethane. And I'll do that before I mount it on the cart. Okay, got the drawer fronts and the cabinet door fronts all painted and everything, and ready to put the hinges on. And I thought that I would throw a little bit of detail in here for anybody that's not dealt with the offset hinges before. I know European hinges are very common and wide use, but in this particular case I had these 3/8 offset hinges, so I decided I would use them up. And also, if you're retrofitting some old cabinets somewhere, the 3/8 offset was very, very common. So I'll get the camera zoomed down here. I'll show you how we mount these. Okay, a 3/8 offset hinge looks like this. It's got a little 3/8 offset here, and this sits into the where I rabbited out the door. It sits back in like this, so that on the front, when you mount this right here, everything will be flush, and this will be flush against the cabinet. What I've done is I made a couple marks 2 inches in from each end for these particular doors, and I'll get these screwed in and mounted. This here is what's called a self-centering bit. You put this over the hole, and when you drill your pilot hole, it will automatically center it. It's a little risky to try to drive these screws in just freehand, so if you end up off center, your hinge will be off center. Well, there's one of my little bumpers. Thought I had a bug chasing me there for a second. Okay, and it's just like that. And these are self-closing hinges, so they got a pretty good snap to them when they snap back. And that's how it'll look on the front. So I'll get the rest of these put on and get them mounted on the cabinet. Okay, for mounting the doors onto the cabinet, it's upside down on top of another cart, just so I don't have to bend over to do this. Take a small strip of cardboard, and of course if your cabinet's upright, you'll want it on the bottom, but since I'm upside down, I'll put it on the top. You set your door in place. Making sure that piece of cardboard is underneath there. Drill your pilot holes. There again, it's always good to use these self-centering bits. If you try to just take off with one of these screws into the plywood, it's liable to go cattywampus and you'll have a problem. Having a problem anyway here. Just like that. I'll do that over here on the other side. Okay, got the top mounted on it. Put a couple knobs on my cabinet doors, put the drawers in, and then on the end right here, added a plug-in strip. It's got a 15-foot cord on it. I happen to like this particular brand. It's called Smart Electrician of all things. Makes me chuckle since I am a retired electrician. It's got ears on the end so you can wrap the cord around it for storage. You don't have the cord laying all over. Got a little bit of paint touch up to do on the handle over here yet. Next time I got the orange paint out. Otherwise, we got the 4-wheel swivel on it, so I can turn this any way I want. Got the brakes on the front, and I can stop it and make it stay in one place. Overall, I'm happy with it. One thing I decided to change a little bit. Originally I was going to put the drill press right here in the middle, facing that way, and I figured out if I put my drill press on this end, facing that way, and I've already done a little trial fit. I haven't actually mounted these things yet. I'll have the drill press so it'll face this way, and I can work with it, and if something's wide, it's not an issue. And then at the same time, on this end, I'm going to put my Triton spindle sander. I'm going to mount it on this end here, facing that way, because obviously I won't be working off the back of it. I will be working from the front, and if I have a wide piece, it won't make any difference. It'll also free up some bench space behind me, which is a premium thing in this little tiny shop area I've got here. So I'm going to go ahead and get these mounted, and try to give you a little bit of a demonstration on how it looks and how it works. Okay, here we have it. It's completed. I got the spindle sander mounted on this side, the drill press mounted on that side, did a little Velcro one wrap for cable management so I don't have cords hanging all over the place. I haven't decided what I'm going to keep down in the lower cabinets yet, but on this side here, it's a handy place to keep my extra sanding belts and sleeves for this. And all the little small parts that I've been concerned would fall off of this at some point or bounce off or get knocked off. A little $1.99 Sterilite container there. Hold that small hardware right there handy in the drawer. And this side, I got the drill press vise in there, and there's plenty of space for other accessories. I'll probably put a drill index in here, maybe put my Forstner bits in here, have a good place to keep them. And incidentally, a little hint, if you do have a little bench top drill press and you have a hard time keeping track of the chuck key, they make these magnets that are extremely strong, and they, assuming you have a steel or a cast iron drill press, it's a good place to keep the chuck key. One of the magnets on there, and you'll know where that key is all the time. Okay, some final thoughts on this. Yeah, it's a little exotic for what it's used for. I mean, it is just shop furniture. And economics, yeah, I don't really have much in this. The carts I got at that auction, I did have to buy some casters. Most of the hardware on here was leftovers from other projects. The masonite that I used for the panels, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I got for free as they were used for a temporary floor and some switchgear. I got a little bit of plywood involved. These were leftover scraps from some cabinet and metalwork I did for a fireplace. So the top here was made out of some Douglas fir joist cutoffs, so no real expense into that. Time-wise, yeah, it took quite a bit of time, and yes, I could have just built one out of plywood, but that wouldn't be any fun. I like a challenge. And I've got two more of these carts, and I may do something similar with those. One of them I already have my DeWalt planer on, but I don't have anything done with the base of it, and because there's a flat surface down there, and we all know what flat surfaces collect, anything you can throw on them. And the other cart I've got that doesn't have, well, shouldn't have anything on it, is piled up with a bunch of junk too. So maybe I'll do something with that here in a future video for possibly my scroll sander, although that may be a little tall for my plans for that. But otherwise, you got something out of this video or kind of got a kick out of it, would appreciate getting a thumbs up. Of course, we're always looking for subscribers, and if you ring the bell, the little icon bell just to the lower right of the video, you'll be notified when we post another video. Otherwise, this has been a fun little project. It had to have been done over several weeks because we've gotten so busy with our greenhouses and nursery here. But I'm glad to have this done. It's mobile, it's easy to move, the brakes work well, so I'm happy with it. And I think it's going to be handy for the way I have to operate things in the shop. Since everything needs to be on wheels, I have a small area, I need to move things around. So hopefully you got something out of this, and it might give you an idea in the future. Otherwise, I'm Roger. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.